Good afternoon. A little something on Thomas Hobbes. So I have actually an older edition of the text. I have the 7th edition. So pages will not be the same. However, if you look at Hobbes and go to the introduction, you'll find something kind of odd in the introduction, the first page there. Under paragraph 1, he says, "Nature, the art by which God hath made and governs the world, is by the art of man, as in many other things, so in this imitated, that it can make an artificial animal. For seeing life is but a motion of limbs, the beginning whereof is in some principle within." Okay, yada, yada, yada. You can keep reading it yourself. The point he's making is this. So, God created the world, good enough, and God created man, good enough. And man, because he is pretty cool and has rational abilities, we also can create things. So man can actually make artificial animals, right? And if you think about it, our machines are basically artificial animals, right? They do things for us. And one of the artificial animals that we can make is an artificial man. And as he says, continuing down, "For by art is created that great Leviathan called Commonwealth, or state in Latin civitas, which is but an artificial man, though greater of stature," etc. So we're talking about government here. This work is called the Leviathan. And Leviathan is a big old word for a huge sea monster. Jonah, it's a biblical thing, is probably where most people would remember it from. It basically is a whale or sea monster or something. So the point there in the first introduction, in the title, is the idea that to Hobbes, government has to be like a huge, powerful whale, essentially. And we'll see kind of how that works. But first of all, it's important to realize that Leviathan is actually a creation, right? It's an artificial man is this huge dominant thing. Because government, he's going to argue, is very similar to a regular man. The apparatus of government, the institutions and all that kind of stuff, justice and whatnot, the justice system, are in the same as the muscles and bodies and joints in an actual human body. So the comparison is society to human body, much like in the Republic, Book 2, when Plato compared the soul of the man to the soul of the city, same kind of thing. So the difference is that, so there's the similarity between the body, which is a machine, and the government, which basically is a machine, and the soul of the body is what animates the body, right? So it's our souls that allow us to make decisions. And the soul, here's the whole thing, in the individual is what rules over the entire body, right? So when we're alive and conscious, we do things and make our bodies do things. So in a way, the body is sort of like a machine. This might not hold water today. A lot of people would say there's more of a connection between mind and body. But to these guys in this period, it's like the soul was sort of like a little, literally ghost inside of the machine. The soul is what drives the body, like a person would drive a car, that kind of thing. And so the soul is what makes the body machine work together for a higher goal, right? So in other words, while you do have a foot, it's not as if your whole life is about your foot, right? Your foot is subservient to the body. In fact, most of the time, you're probably not even aware of your foot. But when you want to go to work, your soul just starts walking, makes your body start walking, and your foot goes along with it. So in the same way, he's saying the soul of the government is the sovereign. So in other words, there's got to be a soul, and that soul is what organizes all of the different parts for a greater good, for the good of all. So in the same way that the foot is ruled by the soul for the common good of the body and the mind, so the citizen is subservient to the government, and the government, the governor, is essentially like the soul, if that kind of makes sense. Okay. Kind of cogitate on that for a little while. And then if you flip through the reading for the next few pages, part 1, you get chapter 1, 2, 3. They're talking about of man. In other words, he's trying to understand how the human mind works. And it's interesting, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Do go back on it. Where I do want to pick up, though, is on chapter 5, where he talks about of reason and science. And to make a long story short, if you read it, the second paragraph in that section, he says, out of which we may define, that is to say determine, what that which is meant by this word reason, when we reckon it amongst the faculties of the mind. For reason in this sense is nothing but reckoning, that is, adding and subtracting, etc., etc. His point. To the medievals and to the ancients, reason was a power that separated us from the animals. It was a power that allowed us, to know God, to know good, and that kind of stuff. What Hobbes is saying is it's nothing but the ability to add and subtract, basically. It's nothing but the ability to do math. That's all he's saying. So it's nothing higher. And that's significant, as we'll see in a minute. And if you continue to chapter 6, of the interior beginnings of voluntary motions, commonly called passions, and the speeches by which they are expressed. If you look at number 7, well, if you read that whole thing, but specifically in number 7, what he's saying there is, let me read the quote. But whatsoever is the object of any man's appetite or desire, that is it which he for his part calleth good, and the object of his hate or aversion evil. So what he's doing is he's talking about human nature. So one thing about human nature is that we're rational, but reason is nothing but adding and subtracting. Secondly, good and evil are nothing but what we want and what we don't want. And so we don't think of good, this is where he's going, in some Platonic or Aristotelian or religious sense of some higher kind of universal or eternal good of the forms or something like that. Not at all. What he's saying is ultimately good equals what we want, and reason ultimately is nothing but how we get what we want. So if you imagine a tripartite soul, right? Appetite, reason, emotion, appetite. Essentially, Hobbes is turning it upside down. And what he's saying is what rules us is what we want, appetite. And reason is simply the way to get the thing that we want. So at the end of the day, if you're Hobbes, your understanding of human nature is much different than the ancients and medievals. That is, if Plato would think that, oh yeah, we have form and we have reason and, we can attain enlightenment and all that. And you had the medievals saying, oh yeah, have divine qualities within us that relate us to God and stuff. Essentially what Hobbes is saying is there's no difference between you and a bear. Because at the end of the day, if bears want what? They want to eat. They want to have a place to live. They want to make a family. At the end of the day, that's kind of what we want. The only difference is the bear has only his claws to get his salmon, whereas human beings, because we have reason, can invent all kinds of complex tools to get more salmon than we need. But other than that, aside from reason as a tool to get what we want, we're essentially very similar. And we are motivated by what we want, in other words, our desires and passions, not by reason. Okay. Now, so what does that mean? In chapter 13, if you go to chapter 13, so here's the deal. He says, nature hath made men so equal, chapter 13, paragraph 1, hath made men so equal in faculties of body and mind as that, though there be one man sometimes manifestly stronger in body or of quicker mind than any other, yet when all is reckoned together, the difference between man and man is not so considerable as that one man can thereupon claim to himself any benefit to which another may not pretend as well as he. Here's what he's saying. So at the end of the day, when it comes to human beings, yeah, some people are taller, stronger, smarter than others. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference when it comes to our ability to get what we want. In other words, think of it this way. If you had a bunch of bananas and you dropped it in front of a group of gorillas, what would happen? Most people would think, oh, the gorillas would fight it out. They wouldn't, actually. Because if you ever watch the animal shows, right? Animals always have a pack order. And in the pack order, it's all very orchestrated. The alpha male goes, then the next male, then the next male, yada, yada, yada. So it's all figured out ahead of time who's going to get what. And so The alpha male is chosen because he's the biggest and the strongest. It's very simple. All the other gorillas look at him and they're like, wow, that guy's really big, so I'm going to go ahead and let him make his choice, and then I'll come later. And that's essentially how it works in the animal kingdom. What Hobbes is saying, though, is that in human societies we don't have that natural hierarchy because human beings are essentially equal. So even though Arnold Schwarzenegger may be much stronger than I am, with a sword, I could take care of him. Or if I gang up with other people, I could take care of him. In other words, animals don't have reason, and so they don't think of things like deception and murder. But people do. Human beings do. And so therefore we're equal. Okay. Not maybe the kind of equality we tend to think about today, but that's Hobbes' point. We're all equal. And if we're all equal, and we're also all greedy, and we also think that we're entitled to all kinds of stuff, then when you add it up, everyone's greedy, everyone's equal in their capacities, and we all want the same stuff. It's a combination of constant warfare. And that's what he says. He says, because of, in chapter 13, paragraph 9, because of that condition of natural equality, this is what he says about, you know what? Do I have my glasses somewhere around here? Dang. I can't really see this too good. He says, in number 9, whatsoever therefore is consequent to a time of war, where every man is enemy to every man, the same is consequent to the time wherein men live without any security other than their own strength and their own invention shall furnish them withal. In such condition there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain. And consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, nor use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and, which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of a violent death, and a life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. All right, so in other words, life kind of sucks if you're human because we're equal and because we're repetitive. So at the end of the day, we will kill each other to get stuff, which is why if you drop food in front of gorillas, they'll have a peaceful way to distribute it. Granted, if you're on the bottom of that pack, you kind of get screwed over. Drop food among hungry human beings, and they'll fight each other for it. That's the difference. Okay, so what's the point of all that? Well, and this is where we, on page 14, at this point things are not page 14, I'm sorry, paragraph 14, still chapter 13. Things are looking pretty grim here in terms of Hobbes' understanding. And if you are familiar with these post-apocalyptic shows like Walking Dead is a great example of what life would be like to Hobbes without government. This is where we're going. And in chapter 13, paragraph 14, he turns things over into, okay, so we've got some Walking Dead here, because think about it, right? If you were hungry and there was no government, would you not steal from the Walmart to feed your children? And then if you got really hungry and there was no food left at the Walmart, would you break into your neighbor's house? Might you even kill somebody in order to survive? And shows like, like Walking Dead and all these other things give us a window into, if these premises are true, that's exactly what happened. We would turn into violent tribes that would constantly make war with each other. Okay, but this is what he says in 14, and this is important. He says, the passions that incline men to peace are fear of death, desire of such things as are necessary to commodious living, and the hope by their industry to obtain them. And reason suggesteth certain articles of peace upon which men may be drawn to agreement. These articles are they which otherwise are called the laws of nature, of which I shall speak more later. So, if you recall, he had said that ultimately we are driven by our passions to get things. Greed. We're not driven by reason. Reason is nothing but a tool to get what we want. And we're all equal, which means that we are going to violently fight for the stuff that we believe that we should have because we are equal to everybody. Okay. So the good thing, though, is that reason can help us out, because reason, the passions that incline men to peace are fear of death, desire of such things as necessary for commodious reason, living, and the hope to their industry of obtaining them. So, in other words, why do we want peace? Because this is the other thing. We strive for peace. But as he says, and here's why we want peace. One, because we fear death, right? So if we have peace, we don't have to be constantly watching our backs. We all to a certain extent fear death. So one of the reasons we would seek peace is because we're afraid to die. Second, the desire of such things is necessary to commodious living. In other words, stuff. We want to have stuff, right? Nobody wants to live in a tent for their whole life, right? In The Walking Dead, they want to secure houses and put walls around them and have better stuff and better food. Nobody wants to live under a bridge, right? Well, most people don't want to live under a bridge. And third, and a hope of their industry to obtain them. So we want to stay alive, we want to get stuff, and we also want the hope to get the stuff that we work for. So if you add that up, that means, and here's the whole thing, in the next sentence he says, and reason suggesteth a convenient articles of peace upon which may be drawn to agreement. So reason tells us, look, if you want to have more stuff, the best thing to do is to seek peace. As long as we seek peace, then we will be squared away enough to be able to stay alive and work on getting more and better stuff. I'm going to cut this off right now so that it's not too long of a chunk, but there will be a part 2 where I finish this off, so check that out.